we're gonna
moving into the Houston Texans.
Yes, moving down to Houston, Atlanta, Vegas. All right, so a lot of additions and losses here. So let's kind of rattle them off really quickly. Turbo Singletary there, Devin Singletary going to my New York Football Giants. George Fant heading over to Seattle. Jonathan Grenard, good player, former Gator, going over to the Minnesota Vikings. Kind of did a swap there for Danielle Hunter. Malik Collins, defensive tackle, going to 49ers. Sheldon Rankins going to Cincinnati. Blake Cashman, who was a good player for them, is going to Minnesota as well. And then Steven Nelson and Adrian Amos are in the free agency market still. Some of these big additions, we'll start with the biggest ones there. And Stephon Diggs coming over from Buffalo. Also Joe Mixon coming over from Cincinnati. You got Nico Autry coming and Foley Fatakus. I messed his name up already. He's coming from Jacksonville, Mr. Foley.
Yes.
There you go. Derek Bennett coming over from Barnett.
I am not.
You're not going
to the Houston Texans, although that would be pretty sweet.
That would be pretty good. No, it's the way more talented Derek Barnett coming over from Philly. Defensive end Danielle Hunter coming from Minnesota. And then cornerback Jeff Okudah and cornerback Kamari Lassiter, Georgia Bulldog in the draft, who they picked up. So what are some takeaways here? We got a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, no, I think for the most part, we've just gone like we've lost a running back. We've brought in a running back. We lose a defensive tackle. We bring in a better defensive tackle. We lose Jonathan Grenard, who is a good player, but we bring in a better Danielle Hunter. You know, I think that for the most part, they brought in guys that are just like slight upgrades all around for the most part. You know, there are a couple of positions that they didn't or weren't able to fill where they lost some guys at linebacker, at offensive tackle. But for the most part, I think they've got slight improvements in a lot of positions along that defensive line, at running back. Obviously, bringing in Stephon Diggs is basically just addition in that wide receiver room. I think Steven Nelson is a solid corner. You know, Jeff Okudah is definitely not the guy that we expected coming out of the Ohio State University.
The disappointment university.
At corner. But you bring in a vet in Okudah, you bring in the rookie Lassiter to put alongside Stingley Jr. I think Houston just continues to improve over the last 2-3 years. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is. It really is, because I came in like very much trying to poke holes in this team. You got a second-year quarterback. You've got a second-year head coach. They really impressed last year. Are we going to get a regression to the mean? I really was trying to kind of poke holes in this team, and it was pretty freaking hard because of all the things you just mentioned. I think they had a major reload for the better. So let's talk about some of their injuries, though. They do got a decent amount of guys coming off injury. Sure. Tank Dell, someone we could probably breeze through. We all saw that nasty fibular fracture. Probably not the smartest idea to be having your tiny wide receiver be throwing a block in the end zone on goal lines packages. Probably not smart, but it happened. To his credit, he actually threw a really nice block, but someone whipped into his leg. He broke his fibula, one of your lower leg bones. We talk about fractures a lot. Really, they just need time to heal. About 3 to 4 months. He's got 9 months. Should be good to go. Another guy who should be good to go, Jimmy Ward on the back end, safety. He had a quad strain. It ended his season. It looked like a grade 2 quad strain in late December. They put him on IR. He couldn't make it back for the playoffs, but he's got 8.5 months to recover from a 6 to 8 week injury. He should be absolutely good to go. Now we're going to talk about some guys that are a little bit more of a question mark, starting with Titus Howard, offensive tackle. Patellar tendon tear, tore it November 26th. He's got about 9.5 months of recovery, but this is an injury. We talked about your patella tendon. It is what connects the patella to your ischial tuberosity to your lower leg there. Connects your kneecap to the lower leg there. That tendon down there, right below the kneecap. When it's fully torn, requires surgery. About 8 to 10 months of recovery timeline. What are we thinking for Titus Howard?
Yeah, no. Of all the guys on the Texans that we're going to talk about, he's probably the one I'm most concerned with. Partially just due to position, being an offensive tackle. I think he's definitely a need for them. But with that patellar tendon tear, like you said, 8 to 10 month recovery. He's got about 9.5 months until week 1. So we're kind of pushing it there. And as far as the patellar tendon goes, like your thigh muscle, your quadricep muscle, that's how it connects to your lower leg.
Yeah.
And if that tendon isn't good and strong, all of a sudden we're asking for bigger issues. So, he does have a good amount of time to get things strengthened back up, but tendons in general take longer to fully recover than muscular tissue does. So, am I truly concerned? I wouldn't say I'm truly concerned, but like I said, of everybody that we're going to be talking about, he's the one that I'm most concerned with,
Yeah.
just due to the timeline, but also the injury itself.
Yeah, no, I would agree there. The other guy I do want to mention is Lermy Tunsil, the other offensive tackle there. He had a knee scope very similar to Braden Smith. They went up and cleaned some things in with a nagging injury. He missed some games due to a knee injury. That happened in February. He's got about 6.5 months, about a 3 to 4 month typical recovery timeline there. He hasn't returned yet, but he is expected back for training camp. So I think someone, again, we just keep an eye on. If he returns for training camp as expected, good to go. If not, we start to have some concern there for that offensive line. Potentially, both their tackles kind of having some issues. All right, let's get into let's jump over to the fantasy space here. As far as these wide receivers, we got a big 3 in wide receivers. Who
Definitely.
are you taking? We've got Nico Collins at wide receiver 12, Stephon Diggs at wide receiver 20, and Tank Dell at wide receiver 30. Seems like 3 guys that are being drafted near their ceiling. That's going to be hard for all 3 of them to attain that. Who is the guy you are most confident in backing at their ADP?
So, like you said, all 3 of them are being drafted at their ceiling. So, most likely, I can get a similar ceiling at those positions. So, at wide receiver 12, that's like end of the first, early second round. I'm probably going to get a similar dude that doesn't have as many options on the team with Collins. Same thing with Diggs. So I'm probably going to take Tank Dell. Going in or looking back at last season, him and CJ Stroud developed a very good relationship very quickly. And I don't see why that would necessarily go away, even though Tank Dell didn't play the last 5-6 weeks.
Yeah.
So I would probably lean Tank Dell over those 3, even though he's, slotted as wide receiver 3, just because we've already seen him and CJ Stroud's relationship is really, really good. He got plenty of targets last year, and I don't see where that's going to necessarily change, even with the addition of Stephon Diggs.
Yeah. No, look, I like Nico Collins. I think he's a really good player, but I'm taking guys like Michael Pittman and Devontae Adams over him 10 out of 10 days. I'm doing that all the time, right? Guys who are clearly going to get the target share, who are clearly alphas in that wide receiver room. Can you tell me that Nico Collins is the wide receiver 1? Sure, you can make a case for it, but there's no questions with guys like Devontae Adams, Michael Pittman, right? So that's where I would be going as well. I'm really not probably drafting any of these guys just because I think they're going to cannibalize each other a little bit. I think in the fantasy realm, that's going to, that they're going to eat into each other. I'm just going to kind of stay away from that situation. But I think that does make for a good wide receiver room, on the actual football field when it comes to wins and losses, right? I think Joe Mixon is the guy that is being drafted at RB16, and even a guy like Dalton Schultz at tight end 15. I think those are the guys that are kind of being left out of the equation, and everyone's just jumping for these sexy wide receivers. And hey, if we're projecting this offense to be this good, the running back's going to score and the tight end's going to be involved. So I think those are guys that you can absolutely pick up some value here if you're still looking to get in on the Texans and not pay that big fantasy price. All right. Best bets. I believe it is my turn to lead us off with the best bets here. Let's wrap this up with these nice Houston Texans. Houston Texans, who were 10-7, and again, the AFC champions last year, who cashed me a nice plus 450. Thank you, Jacksonville. They're coming in with a win total of 9.5, pretty heavily juiced to the over at -140, the under plus 120. My first best bet for this team, we're going to start off nice and smooth with a nice -110. Joe Mixon over 875.5 rushing yards. We talked about it. I'll talk about it a little bit more. this offensive line went through absolute hell last year. I think every starter got injured at some point for a decent amount of time, including your bookends, Laremy Tunsil and Titus Howard. We talked about Laremy Tunsil is definitely expected back. Titus Howard, a little bit more of a question mark, but still, he is expected back this season. You know, you got Kenyon Green, the rookie Drew Scruggs, and Shaq Mason up in a nice interior offensive line. I think the offensive line is solid, and I think DeMarco Ryans is a hard-nosed football coach. He is going to run the ball. Do not get it confused. I mean, Devin Singletary hit this number last year. I think Joe Mixon is a step up in class than Devin Singletary. I think Joe Mixon is out to prove some things. I mean, the Bengals really kind of left him out to dry, right? It was nothing of his own doing. He was kind of just like a cap casualty there. I think he's got a chip on his shoulder. I really like Joe Mixon this year. I like, he's can do some things out of the backfield, but he's definitely a hard downhill runner. D'Amico Ryans is going to fall in love with him. And my guy, Dameon Pierce, for whatever reason, is seemed to be left just in the perpetual doghouse. So give me Joe Mixon there over 875.5 rushing yards at -110. And then my last bet of the night here is Houston Texans to be the number 1 seed at 8-1. Plus 800. They have a very similar price to be the AFC champion at plus 850. However, some teams like Baltimore and Cincinnati and Kansas City and Buffalo with some more veteran quarterbacks who I might trust more in the playoffs. I do like this Texans team to pick up a lot of wins. Is basically what this bet is for, right? So I thought about them in the AFC championship. I think they have a decent shot, but when you're going up against like Mahomes, Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, guys that have been there before, maybe I'm not going to favor CJ Stroud, but I do like this team to win a lot of games. We talked about their reload on offense and defense. They have a really, really solid front seven. Like reading off some guys, Will Anderson, Danico Autry, Daniil Hunter, Christian Harris, Aziz Al-Shir, Henry To'oTo'o. I mean, those are some solid stud guys across the board. And I really, obviously, we talked about their offensive weapons. So I like the Houston Texans a lot this year. Give me their number 1 seed at plus 800. All right, brother, wrap us out here. What do you got?
Yeah, so let's start with Tank Dell. Like I said, I really like Tank Dell. Really, really, of those big 3, I probably like him the most, even though he's slotted at the last spot in terms of ADP fantasy-wise. But I'm going to go with his over 4.5 touchdowns for my best bet. It's at plus 100. He covered this in 11 games last year. He had 7. He almost doubled it in 11 games last year. So obviously him and CJ Stroud have a connection. I don't see really any way that he doesn't go over 4.5 this season. I also, again, this is where we somewhat differ. I like the Texans to finish first in this division, the Jags to finish second. Like I said, I like the Jags to make the playoffs. I like Houston. So I'm going to go Texans first, Jags to barely sneak in the playoffs. So first and second at plus 400. And then I also am going to throw out sort of a long shot here, but the Texans to have to have the most wins in the NFL.
Okay.
In terms of regular season, that's 19-1.
No.
So like you said, there isn't much in terms of like, just in general, this Houston Texans roster is solid.
Nope, top to bottom.
From top to bottom, and I think second year head coach, second year with CJ Stroud there, that dude just wins. He's a baller. He doesn't care what you say, doesn't care what Micah Parsons has to say, with their podcast shit. But anyways, Houston, I think, is gonna win some games this year, and I would not be surprised if they end up, going 13-4, 14-3, something worth mentioning as that number 1 seed, just like you said.
No, I like it. I mean, I think I have to play it if I like them to be the number 1 AFC. AFC, I mean, they're the stronger division, so maybe they cannibalize a little more. But I think I got to sprinkle on that if I like them to be the leader in the AFC. To lead the division 19-1, you're getting the nice odds there. So I do like that play.